Hello, YouTube. This is Chance Paladin. Normally I'm playing games for you, but another thing I do, and I wanted it to be a part of the channel, is training. I do a lot of training, and I kind of touched on it on my other channel, Star Wars Paladin. Also, I kind of train and talk to you guys as I go about just life, universe, gaming, everything, but one of the things you may not have known is I actually have full-blown training presentations that I've developed over the years based on all my experiences, and this is for some of it's for specific jobs, some of it's for every job if you just got to deal with other people. How it all started is internal auditing. I used to be an internal auditor for quality, but this applies to everything, every kind of auditing. And you may think, oh, there's no auditing jobs out there. There's tons of auditing jobs out there. Financial auditing, environmental auditing, quality auditing, IT auditing, and every other one of the million international standards is there's audits. There's auditors for all of them. So it's a big deal because you want third parties to audit you, not your suppliers and customers. And if everybody does that, then people don't have to visit each other's plants all the time and offices and make sure that like the building's not going to collapse, which may sound extreme, but I don't know, if you watch the news, buildings collapse. And they go, why didn't we know? Well, it's because nobody was auditing the place, or if they did audit, they failed it, nobody did anything. Or for example, the Gulf oil spill, that had audits done and nobody did anything about the audits, and later on the auditors became a part of that investigation, and there's just so many. There's products that have killed people. They always go back to the auditors, which is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. If the auditor does their job right, you save lives, you improve businesses, you improve the bottom line, and you make all the companies want to work well together. So people were always asking me, what's auditing? What's it take to be an auditor? What are the different levels of auditor training? How do we become certified? So I put together this brief presentation to answer all of the basic questions I get. So we're just going to get started. We're going to use QMS, Quality Management System, ISO 9001-2008, as a template, since it's one of the most, I don't want to say popular, but maybe the most popular, but the most common standard that's out there. Companies all over the world subscribe and have to be compliant with ISO 9001-2008. It's just basic quality management, making sure you're running either a quality department or you're running quality products, doing whatever your job is to the highest level of quality possible. So I'll explain what ISO 9001-2008 is. ISO stands a little bit backwards, but it stands for the International Organization for Standardization. 9001 is the code for quality management system, and 2008 is the effectivity year. So if that number ever changes, or there's like a little 2009 or whatever, 09 after this, that's been updated, and you can go to ISO's website and they tell you what the updates were. And they've started to bake environmental into it, which is 14001-2004, but that's a different story. They upgrade these every couple years, so you got to resubscribe, and it costs a little bit of money, but it's worth it. It's very, very worth it. But I show here some of the predecessors. Was in 2000, there was a big update, and then back in 94, then prior to that it was QS 9000. So fun fact, if you're ever going to another business and you see we're QS 9000 certified, or we're 9001 1994, or this is the most common one you'll see, because this is when everybody got and their mom got certified right here, we're ISO 9001 2000 certified. Yeah. So, anyway. So you might ask, what is a quality management system? The quality management system is the policies, procedures, forms, and work instructions and methodologies behind how they are controlled to ensure the quality of your product. So what's that actually mean, though? I get asked. This is probably the biggest question I get asked, more than any other one. You have, or you should at least, have documents on how to do your job. It doesn't matter if you work in fast food, like making sandwiches, or it doesn't matter if you work in an office, just an administrative assistant, or if you work at the DMV. Especially the government has tons and tons and tons of these, which is good. In fact, if you look at any government form at the bottom, you'll see control numbers, and that means they're all controlled documents. And they all have policies, procedures, work instructions, job aids, standards, specifications, and training, and the whole 9 yards to go with all of it. And at the center of all that's a document management system with owners, review cycles, reporting effective dates, change history, last reviewed, record information, the document type, and probably even more than that. That's just the absolute basics that you need. But the point behind these documents is that everybody should know how to do their job, and you should be able to prove that everybody knows how to do their job, that they're doing their job right, and that it's all uniform. And you may ask why I'm telling you this if this is auditor training, but it's because the first thing to being an auditor is actually knowing what the heck you're going to audit. You can audit blind, but there's a lot of risks. You're going to miss a lot of things, and you're allowing them to lead you instead of you leading them. You need to be providing value, so you need to know as absolutely much about what their systems are supposed to have before you go in, and that's part of auditor training. So unless you're trying to audit outside your training, you should know this. But in case you don't know this, which most people don't, that's why I tell you this first, so you can understand the auditing portions later. So basic concepts. You're searching for evidence of conformance, not non-conformance to the standard. There are people out there that believe that they're adding their worth by finding how far into non-conformance you are. That's an awful, awful, awful way to audit. People hate that, and it really tells them who you are if you do that. Usually new auditors do that, or a new auditing company that just got the business, they come in and show you how wrong the last people are, show you how good they are because they found this stuff. No, all you're doing is pissing everybody off. If you find something terrible, yeah, but you don't go purposefully looking for it. If they have a good system, if profits are up, and if everything's safe, chances are they have a pretty good system, and you're not there for maintenance and maintaining status quo, but you're there to keep them honest and to provide a little bit of updates here and there when they're ready to make those jumps, and just give them suggestions. The caveat to this is if it is their very first certification, then by all means run them through the ringer. But if they already have certification, then you're not searching for non-conformance. Now, when you're looking at a problem, don't ever look at it as a people problem. It's a procedure problem. Now, this is contrary to what I usually say in my videos. When I say this is a people problem, that's a people problem, this is a behavior problem. Well, when you're auditing a system, it's almost never the person's problem, the person's fault. Only as an absolute last resort, if everything else worked and the person just flat out decides not to do it. But even then, you got to go through HR and figure out why their corrective behavior isn't working or why they weren't able to identify this. I mean, even then, it's just barely a people problem. If somebody goes off the deep end, they still need to have systems in place for that. So, procedure, not person, not the individual. The other thing with that is every procedure is right until proven wrong. Never go into a procedure believing that the procedure's wrong. Now, sometimes with tolerances and really complicated math, it can happen. Or if you notice that the procedure's just pointing to itself in an endless loop and you know that it won't work. The procedures are usually right and it's just some kind of typo or something. It still needs to be corrected, but don't review the procedure believing that it's wrong. Otherwise, your mindset's screwed up and everything they tell you when you go to review the process, nothing's going to add up. Always remember that the auditor's goal is to add value, not get people in trouble or ask questions irrelevant to the system. This happens all the time. You're talking to some high-level manager who had to push a bunch of other people off to make time for you, and then you're just wasting their time. Don't do it. It has to be relevant, pertinent, to the point, as soon as you've broken the ice. As soon as they answer your question, don't go fishing for more stuff just because they answer your question really fast. Say, okay, thank you. You answered my question. That's the only question I had, and I will let you go. I appreciate it. This was fine. Everything was fine. That's the only question I had, and let them go. Don't. I've seen so many times where people go in and they just waste everybody's time because they have a captive audience. Auditing's not about having a captive audience. Auditing is about getting your ass and doing your work and getting back out again as absolutely fast as you can, so you don't impact their business negatively. So, likewise, getting people in trouble will make people not want to talk to us being the auditors. You get a bad reputation really fast, or they won't want to talk to you if you notice that people are getting in trouble. So, you have to go out of your way to let people know that you'll personally guarantee to the furthest of your ability that you are not deliberately getting people in trouble, and and if people are scared about getting in trouble, you as the auditor need to take management behind closed doors and say, why are people so scared of us? We are doing our best. We're being very, very positive, and we can't help but notice that everybody's petrified. People are talking about getting fired. And you bring that up directly to management, and you have to be prepared to walk. If people say, well, if they don't do a good job, heads are going to roll. No. You can't audit under those circumstances. I will not audit under those circumstances. I've several times where managers have said, well, they better do a good job or they're going to get fired. I stop them right in their tracks. And I say, no, they won't. Okay? And I need you to tell them, since you've said this in front of them, that they're not going to get fired over this. Tell them that you're not being serious. They're not going to get fired over this. And that's a dicey situation, but the auditor's credibility and the safety of the employees that they're talking to has got to be number one. But it used to happen. People used to get fired at the end of audits for nonconformances. Even though it's not the person's fault, there's a nonconformance. It's a procedure problem. So that actually used to happen all the time. I mean, it's terrible. Now, if you have colossal nonconformances and they have internal issues where they told management to fix something and they didn't, people may lose their job, but that's their own internal issue. And I've seen that happen where they were told to do something, they didn't do it, and then the corrective action is termination. But that's usually at a much higher level That's not with the low level people that you're going to be talking to. Usually they just do whatever they're told. It's somebody higher up that is not setting the proper example. So, we as auditors need to maintain credibility and objectivity at all times, which means knowing to choose your battles wisely. You can be technically right and still lose, unfortunately, because you only have a certain set of credibility. You only have a certain amount. If you think of them as points or tokens or something, you only have a certain amount and you got to choose where to put them. You don't just get... You're not like a gigantic consultant company, even if you are a gigantic auditing company, or whether you're an internal auditor. You still don't have a ton of credibility unless you've been auditing with them for years. You can't just go in and say, "Whoa, you need to change everything." They're gonna throw you out, or they're gonna ask for somebody else, or they're just not gonna listen to anything you say. So you got to choose your battles really, really carefully, starting with the most important and working your way backwards. And what a lot of auditors will do is they'll write down their concerns if they haven't quite decided about their concern yet, how valid it is. And they'll talk privately with other auditors at the end of the day in a closed room. The business is not invited. And then if they really need to escalate it, they'll call they'll call their parent company and say, "Listen, we found this, we're not sure, what do you think?" And they'll start consulting their other auditors, and they'll say, "Well, do we really understand the problem?" And then they'll bring in the internal auditors from the business, and they'll bring in management and say, "Could you please explain us this?" And that's happened before. And you got to make a couple phone calls, and you got to bring people in and try to understand it before you can make a decision. But don't ever jump into a situation. You have to remain objective, which means letting them tell you. And especially in this day and age, everyone's got different accents and backgrounds and educations, and I would say almost every single non-conformance I ever saw was just a communication issue. But even after all that, or if people are really, really stubborn, write it up anyway and force them to respond. But just understand that you have to be very, very cautious. Don't just do that for everything. Otherwise, again, you lose credibility. So, a lot of people ask why I conformed to ISO 9001 2008. I do get asked this a lot. It's expensive, and if you don't have a lot of employees and if you don't ship a lot of parts, usually people try to get around it by kind of a micro agreement between the businesses saying we have a quality management system, but we can't afford, because for 3 years it could be $20,000+ just for everything. I mean, accreditation's expensive. The auditor's time's several $1,000s a day. Yes, several thousand a day is how much the usual auditor makes. And that's only if you're not careful. Make sure you're not paying for their car, their food, their hotel. There's been auditing companies that can rack up $10,000+ per day. It's absolute. If you're not careful, they can rob you blind. So it's usually for medium to large companies. But even then, you still have to really watch the contract every single time. But Everybody does it for basically the same reasons. There are customers that require it. So I was talking to a friend of mine, and I said, well, do you do business with the military? Do you do business with municipalities? They almost all require conformance to ISO 9001 2008. Or if it's engineering, it's TS 16949, which is a level above ISO 9001 2008 because you have to control your engineering drawings. It's absolutely imperative for any manufacturing that you conform to this. And a lot of people just don't understand what it is, but even their quality or their consultants or their legal will state no, they have to conform. They have to conform no matter what. Even if they don't know what it is, they'll still say you have to conform to it. So customers require it. But what does that mean? That means that you need to require it from your suppliers also. And you think, well, this just creates some kind of weird chain, self-fulfilling prophecy pyramid scheme. Blah, blah, blah. Well, no. It's so everybody maintains a standard without having to be visiting each other every 2 seconds. People are still going to do it anyway. They're still going to show up and want to check things out, but not nearly as much. Not if you've got a giant we conformed ISO 9001 2008 on your wall, the date and stuff, and whoever your registrar is. And it provides the framework for superior quality in the products and processes. I say our products and processes, that's just the way I talk, because if I was somewhere, that's what I'd be saying. I'd be acting like I was them. That's kind of weird, but anyway. You want to have superior quality. And if there's some kind of... I don't know how many people do JD Powers anymore, because they've lost a lot of credibility, but whatever... If there's like magazines that you want accolades in, trade magazines, or if you want to put it at your trade shows that either you're the undisputed market leader or you have undisputed quality, you have to actually have superior quality, which means you got to be tracking your warranty and quality and everything. But that all starts with ISO 9001. Safety is another key. It's not brought up a lot, but it's still a part of the standard. Making sure your employees are safe. Spoiler, if you go to a factory and they're not changing the days since last accident because they have accidents every single day, that stuff is huge red flags. And continual improvement, which a lot of companies still aren't doing. But if you've ever heard of Lean or Six Sigma, I even, like a long time ago, in a distribution center I worked at, even they had Six Sigma. So they might not know Lean or the Toyota Way or any kind of a continual improvement standard or whatever, but almost everybody at least knows what Six Sigma is, which is just one way of working on improvements. So I always get asked, well, how long did it take? How long did it take for you to be able to do this? Because we always, with anyone that wants to challenge the standard, well, what exactly does the standard say? You know, the standard's only a couple pages. But it's a scalable framework. It's so you have wiggle room, and it's so it's scalable from small to large businesses. And it takes a year to even just basically understand it. It could take 2 years to the rest of your life to actually interpret it properly. And there are very few people who are qualified to interpret ISO 9001 2008. It's going to be like that for whatever standard you're auditing to. you have to know your standard, or at least be trying to understand, read, comprehend, interpret your standard. And that means when the auditors come to audit you, you ask them the same thing. Well, okay, how would you interpret this? How would you interpret that? You just got to be careful not to expose yourself. But I was auditing for 6 years, and there were still things that I was learning. It's like a continual, permanent learning experience. So keep that in mind. Just because you've memorized it doesn't mean, well, even that takes time. It doesn't mean that you can interpret it. You've got to... I was reading the standard for like a half an hour to 2 hours every day for like 6 months, I think. And then I was reviewing it for the next 3 years, writing and rewriting it. I wrote it and rewrote it and rewrote it and broke it down and put it back together. I don't know how many times until I understood it inside and out. I mean, I made the standard like my life. And if you're going to be an auditor, that's what you have to do. You have to understand whatever standard it is that you're trying to audit to. Otherwise, you're not going to help anybody. And people are going to run circles around you. If they even have a limited understanding of either your standard or just how to argue. So, the logic behind the standard, there's the scope, which is anything that could potentially affect the quality of the product. You have to think quality from beginning to end, not how it's always been done. You'll hear this a lot, especially if they haven't been certified yet. Well, this is always how it's been done. Okay, it's probably wrong then. Or it's undocumented. The sooner you find an issue, the less the impact on the issue. If you look at a scaling curve, the sooner you find it, it costs almost nothing. As soon as it gets out into the field, whatever it is you have, the cost is usually astronomical. Just look at, well, right now it's GM, but I mean, you can always find some car company or some truck company or some product in the news that has to do a safety recall, or fruit or vegetables, you name it, meat. The sooner you find it, the less of an impact from safety and monetary. And just think about like emerging issues. You're always trying to find the issue as quickly as possible before the products get out the door very far. And quality management goes hand in hand with other continual improvement initiatives, but has specific requirements to maintain conformance. So that's another reason why everybody does QMS, because it complements everything. It's really, really good standard. And the most important thing, well, arguably anyway, is the quality policy. Without a quality policy, you've instantly failed the whole thing. And if enough people can't recite it or and tell them what it means to them, you failed, because it just means, for all intents and purposes, even if you have a quality system, if nobody can say what the policy is and say why quality is important, it doesn't matter. They could be following everything else, but this is the actual buy-in. This buys people in to your system. So, and it's the easiest way to tell. You just walk up to 3 people and say, hey, what's the quality policy? Okay, what's it mean to you? And if you see 3 people and 3 people can't tell you, and you always have a manager with you when you do this, you've got a problem. Or you're talking to third party or something, but even they should be able to tell you what theirs is, even if they're a third party. And it's really small. It's just a couple sentences, something that's easy to remember, like, we have a commitment to quality to make sure our products are as absolutely good as possible for our customers. And they go, okay, what's that mean to you? Well, that means I make this little widget as good as I possibly can for the customer. Okay, good enough. It's really simple. I suggest everyone have it printed on their security badge or a little card in their wallet or something so they can always have it. But it has to be the most updated version. You see people with old versions or sometimes two iteration old versions, and now you just go, oh, jeez. So, yep, the auditors always ask, what does the policy mean to you? You need to be able to interpret it. People get super nervous, and so that's why you always accompany the external auditors if you're the internal auditor. Or if you're the external auditor, that's why you always have the internal auditor and a well-trained manager with you. So you can calm people down and say, okay, well, what do you do? Okay. Why is quality important? Okay. If they smart off, though, you need to correct them. They need to understand that's very serious. Also, I don't have this written here, but also you got to be really careful when talking to union employees. That's why you always have, that's the other reason why you always have a well-trained manager with you. Some of these questions you can ask a union employee, and some of these questions you can't. And it's really complicated. I'm not going to even try to go into it. Suffice it to say, keep a well-trained manager with you at all times. Usually try to find a manager that has many union employees so they know the ropes. If you have to consult people on what to say, they need to remember that they're upstream and downstream customers, even if they're internal. You do the best job you possibly can for your upstream and downstream customers, and vice versa. Because it eventually leads to the end customer, and if everybody took care of their upstream and downstream, then everything would be fine. You wouldn't have all these problems with quality in the news right now. I want to briefly go over top-down management. This is really important because, well, not only is it a part of the quality management standard, but you'll see where the manager will say, oh, I want them to do X, Y, and Z, and you go to their desk or cube or workstation or whatever, and they're not working on it. You go, why aren't you working on it? And they go, because they never told me to. And then you go back to the manager, and he says he never told you to. Oh, well, yeah, well, he's just supposed to know. And you go, well, how is he supposed to know? Is it logged in some kind of system somewhere, what your expectations are? And no, not just the job requirements. Because job requirements is a whole mess within itself. But it means day-to-day expectations, week to week, month to month, quarter to quarter, and year to year, what the expectations are. And that's only the bare minimum. It needs to be reviewed, and the reviews need to be documented. They have to be clearly linked from manager to employee, and you should be able to track it all the way up to the top, to the CEO, or however high the company goes, president, whatever. And it also needs to have a roadmap to eligible growth opportunities. And this is hard because it means you have to have a good training program. It means you have to have a good HR department. And it's going to be expensive if you don't have internal training. And even then, it's a little pricey because you're taking people off their normal job. But it needs to have documented how the employee needs to improve. There's a million reasons for this. Probably the most important is keeping your employees happy and motivated and engaged. But you want to promote from within. Everybody wants to promote from within. Yes, you need to bring in new talent, obviously. But the employees need to know, and they need to know from the top down, what they need to be moving up. There should always be, for everybody, it doesn't matter unless they just don't want to. If they're happy being data entry or whatever, that's good. You need good data entry people. Maybe somebody likes being the janitor or whatever, but if they don't, there should always be a roadmap for how they move up to the next level. And this is where it would be in this top-down management system. So a couple of things on how to conduct yourself. Confidence is super important. This is the hardest thing to teach anybody, is how to be confident. If somebody's not confident, they may never be confident. It's terrible. But if somebody is confident, they immediately do way better with this stuff. Confidence is just key. I can't tell you how to instill confidence in somebody. I can't even tell you how to be confident. I can only tell you that you need to be confident, or you'll get ripped apart. Everything you say, even if it's 100% the truth, even if you found it and you know it and you saw it and you documented it, without confidence, aka the proper mindset, you're gonna just get ripped to shreds. So, and that's that's if you're the auditor or you're the person being audited. If you're trying to audit somebody and they're more confident than you, they're gonna rip you to shreds. But as time goes on, you're eventually going to know so much, you're going to be so good at this, that only the absolutely most confident are really going to be able to put up a fight. And I address that in later presentations. So I want to go over a little bit some of the easiest stuff to look for. And even if you're not an auditor and never plan on being an auditor, if you want to be a little wannabe auditor, these are things you can look for. Expired food, beverages in the vending machines. I see this all the time. It's really irritating. I don't understand why it happens, but usually the food is controlled by a third party, and that means that the company's not controlling their food vendors very well. Somebody internally should always be in charge of that, or at least an internal contractor managing the third party. That stuff, it's not huge, but it's a sign of weakness, and you can usually start to unravel a system that way. Spills and messes. This has happened to me before. You're walking down the aisle and there's like spilled noodles everywhere. Like they dropped their noodles and the noodles went flying. And then the person leaves it there and just keeps going. Like, what? What? And you stand there and you wait and nobody comes to do anything about it. And you got to grab manager and say, why isn't this taken care of? It's a food hazard. It's a slipping hazard. It's gross. You know, what's wrong with you guys? Why isn't this taken care of? But what you do is you follow it procedurally, and they go, well, we got to call maintenance. And say, okay, I will go with you, and we'll call maintenance. Is there some kind of safety cone we can put over this thing? Well, I don't know. You know, well, okay, so these people aren't trained in how to deal with this stuff. And you look around and see if you can find a safety cone. It's just like at a grocery store. If you can't find a safety cone, somebody has to stand there and warn people off. And if they're not doing this, I don't care how low or high or how freaking busy they are, it has to be done this way. It doesn't matter if you're in an office or a warehouse. So how they handle these situations is key. Same thing with filled out fire extinguisher review cards. Every building has to have X amount of fire extinguishers set in X amount. There should be some kind of fire life safety guy or gal that takes care of this, but it might always be them that reviews the actual expirations of the fire extinguishers. And just when you're kind of roaming around, maybe nobody's paying attention to what you're doing, especially if you're in a conference room or whatever, just go flip up that fire extinguisher card and check the date. If that date is like a month in the future, oh, you just stumbled onto something big. And yes, it's happened. These have all happened to me before, several times. So you've got to watch out. And fire extinguishers are one of the easiest ones because they have to write the dates right on them. Bring it up to management. Why isn't this done? Who's in charge of this? Then you go interview that person and say, I found expired or pre-filled out. Either one, if they're expired or if they're pre-filled out. I've seen both. And you just go, why is this expired? Why is this pre-filled out? And you document it. It might not be their fault. It may be some third party, but you still got to document it because you're trying to help the company out. You're not doing anybody any good. You're not doing anybody any good if you go do an audit there for something and like the building burns down because nobody was checking the fire extinguishers. It's not your direct job, but safety. And so sort of, fire extinguishers. People need fire extinguishers to be safe. Tripping hazards, we'll go over that a little bit later, but if you go into a conference room and almost wipe out because there's cords and electronics and stuff on the floor, it's happened to me. It's not funny. It's not cool at all. Outdated metric boards, I see this all the time, where you go in and all the metrics are red and they're 2-3 months old and they're supposed to be updated monthly. And why are you guys recording that you're failing and you're not doing anything about your failing and you're not tracking it now? And you talk to them about it and they take all the metrics down. It's like, no, don't take the metrics down. Tell me what's going on. And furthermore, don't just take metrics down just because I'm standing here, because I'm going to go to your manager and I'm going to ask for those metrics back and we're going to go over this. You can't just take metrics down in front of me. And likewise, if they're all green, that means they're not measuring hard enough. You should never just have all green metrics. Yeah. Here's another one I see all the time. Ambient temperature fluctuations. You walk from one room to one room and you're freezing and you're sweating. And then you'll see a bunch of poor gals like huddled in their cubes with jackets and blankets with heaters on. And it's legitimately cold. It's not that, their bodies don't heat themselves or whatever. It's because it's like 55 degrees in an office room and it shouldn't be. People need to be taken care of. They need to be relatively comfortable. And that stuff you got to take care of. And so you go over and look at the thermostat. And the thermostat will say that it's 73 degrees. And it's not 73 degrees. Everybody's freezing. You can see your breath. It's not 73. Write it. Document it. Put the time down. Maintenance needs to be taking care of that stuff. And then ask, have you guys put in, work requests? Yes, we have. Okay. And then when you go back, you can try to find them when you go to maintenance. So I think I already said obvious spills and messes. Well, no, shop floor too, because it happens in offices and on the shop floors. Here's another one with shop floors. Missing OSHA binders and MSDS paperwork. These are the material safety data sheets and the binders saying what the OSHA requirements are for handling. I apologize, I can't remember what OSHA stands for off the top of my head anymore, but they make sure everybody's safe with chemicals. Every single kind of chemical in every single building is supposed to have MSDS paperwork for it, and there should be an OSHA binder nearby with how all that's got to be dealt with. If they have it in a central location, then everybody's supposed to know where it is, which means you say, well, hey, I see this purple bottle of whatever here. What is it? Oh, it's XYZ. Okay. Where's your OSHA documentation for it? Where's your MSDS sheets? Oh, I don't know. Okay, well, where's your flushing station? Over there. Okay, do you even know if you're supposed to flush your eyes? You know, some of them you're not supposed to flush your eyes. Or you gotta flush your eyes out with some other product. Oh, well, I don't know. Oh my gosh. Stop everything. Get the manager out there. Or go take the manager behind closed doors. What if that poor guy splashed that stuff in his eyes? What would you do? And don't blame him. Well, he's supposed to know. No. You tell me. If he's supposed to know, that means you're supposed to know. Why don't you tell me what he's supposed to do? Well, it's over in a desk drawer. And well, show me. And then it's locked. And where's the key? Well, I don't know. So-and-so's supposed to have it. Well, where are they? They're not here today. Okay, so you're just going to let your coworkers' eyes get burnt out? I mean, where are your priorities? Well, we're trying to make product here. Okay, well, you're not going to be making anything when you're sued 10 feet under because some poor guy's eyes got burnt out because he doesn't have goggles and he doesn't have an apron and you don't have the documentation, you don't even know what's in the bottle. So even if the fire department came to help or if the ambulance came to help, they would know what to do. You know, as an auditor, you're trying to keep people safe from idiots. It's not the employee's fault. I mean, the employee said, well, I've asked for it, and he won't give it to me. He won't tell me where it is. He just says, you put this in this. Say, okay. And you report it all the way up to the top. OSHA and MSDS is not something that you screw around with. Hazards in the driving lanes, I've seen this before where there's just stuff in the road. Usually in a manufacturing facility, the lanes will be marked off with some kind of bright yellow, double yellow, thick yellow with black stripes or something. And those are supposed to be hazard free and you're not supposed to be walking in them unless you look both ways and make sure nobody's going to run you over, which people don't do and they still get ran over. If you go somewhere and the lanes aren't identified and you see hazards everywhere and you see people weaving around boxes and stuff, you've got a huge problem. Mislabeled or unlocked non-conforming products or areas. Control of non-conforming product is probably the single most important fundamental part of quality at a manufacturing facility, because I can't tell you how many times quality found the problem, they quarantined the problem, everything was good, they saved the day, they caught it in time, they put it in the non-conforming area, and either they don't label it right, or they don't send out the note, or nobody reads the note, but night shift comes around, nobody told them during the handoff, they can't find where all their CPUs are or whatever. Oh look, they're sitting over here. We found them. Good job, everybody. Put them in. Product ships. Morning shift comes in, and it's a disaster. It's an absolute fiasco. Not disaster. You're not supposed to use that word. It's a challenge. Now you just cost the company a bunch of money, and a bunch of people are probably going to get screwed up cell phones or computers or whatever it is. You have to have clearly labeled non-conformance areas and lock it. Nobody should be able to get in. Everything should be tagged. Nobody should be digging through there trying to fix things so they can keep the line going. It's ridiculous. And it should all be cataloged too as soon as somebody has time. Preferably you keep somebody working back there that just catalogs it all so it can all get sent back and addressed, taken care of properly. Missing pre-filled out measurement equipment reviews, end-of-line audits. Seen this all the time. You'll go and look at end-of-line audits and everything will be signed even though nothing's there. Well, why do you do that? We just pre-signed it all. You know, so we don't have to get the manager's signature when the product comes down the line. Okay. Fail. That's probably one of the most common non-conformances you'll ever find. Shop floors, manufacturing facilities, anything with end-of-line quality controls. One of the ones that I haven't seen but you might hear it, or you might see it if you're lucky enough. I've heard this story from many different auditors where they'll be sitting there chatting. Someone will be walking by with some product and just drop it on the floor. Concrete from 5 feet up. And then they look at it, they look around, pick it up, and they keep going. And they don't inspect it. They just kind of look at it, sort of dumbfounded, like, how did that get on the ground? And then you ask the manager, you say, hey, did you just see that? Yes, I just saw that. What process is he supposed to follow? Oh, well, he's supposed to take that to the inspection area now that he dropped it. It's supposed to be inspected. And you go, okay, well, he just took it back to the line. What are you going to do about it? Oh, well, we're going to go over and tell him to take that to the inspection area. Okay, then after that, I want to review your documentation for what's supposed to happen. And they might have something, they might not. But you'll find out. Again, haven't seen it, but you'll hear it more often than you'll see it. You hear something drop, and you look around. So, a recap, basically, the main questions when looking at a process: tell me, show me, prove it. That's the same with all. Doesn't matter what you're auditing. Tell me what it is, show me, and prove it. Now, as they're telling you, they'll try to pull the process out. Don't let them do that. They should have to tell you without the process, and then they can show you the process. After they've told you and showed you, then they can show it. Then they can show you the document and link the two together. And this is when you make sure that you collect some evidence for your own credibility, so you can prove that you're actually doing your job. Here's the different levels of audit findings. Some people call these some auditors, companies call these slightly different things, but this is what I prefer. There's majors, where the audit stops and everybody needs to figure out what just happened. Usually behind closed doors with a lot of management. It's usually just a misunderstanding or miscommunication, and it can usually be downgraded. But you need to stop anyway just to make sure. Especially with like non-conforming product. Super important. Minors, they need to be addressed within 90 days. That's pretty standard across all companies. Observations may become a nonconformity if not addressed by the next audit, but that's up to people's discretion. And opportunities for improvement is just food for thought based on their experience. Now, something about this, it doesn't really mention about people breaking the law. And I've talked to auditors with a lot more education than me, but maybe not as much experience. And we've talked about, what do you do if you uncover that they're breaking the law? Now, it depends on what your contract is with them. And it depends, like, if it's financial, for example, and how you report your findings. It depends on the criticality. Like, if you find that an automotive manufacturer is lying to NHTSA, the National Highway Transportation Agency, or I think that's what NHTSA stands for. That's different than, for example, if you find out that they're lying on their finances. But first and foremost, unless people are being murdered and ground up into the meat at a food packing plant or something, that's FDA issue, but it has to, you have to be able to address, the severity and the level, because somebody embezzling money, like a one-off, which happens, in fact I've seen that, somebody had embezzled a lot of money and they were just planning on leaving when they got caught at the last minute, as they were laundering their money out of the company. And I wasn't the one to catch them, but I reviewed the reports in the story and stuff. That that may get brought up to the police, but that's also a management issue, so they can it's something that has to still be brought up to management. It's not something that you can just run and call 911 on, unless obviously you open a room and the meat locker's full of bodies or something. I mean, then obviously you run for your life and call the police and stuff, call the cavalry, but you're not going to find, as you're auditing, I don't think you'll find a lot of people breaking the law. I mean, there's just not very many things that, for example, if there's unions, that the unions won't have already taken care of, or there's government organizations for things like making sure people aren't employing illegals. I mean, HR's got huge amounts of that. If you're a SOX auditor, Sarbanes-Oxley, yeah, you might find, financial stuff. And in your training, it'll tell you exactly what to do, but it also depends on your contract. And it depends on the level that your business is at. Like, if you were hired to find that stuff, obviously you don't turn them in. You turn it over to management. Management takes care of it. However, you may document it in a way to where they absolutely have to. Like, it's mandatory. It's not a suggestion. But that's not in here because it really depends on what you're adding. For example, if you find, here's a common one. You find boxes stacked to the ceiling in a back room. Are they breaking the law? Well, there's fire codes, right? But the fire marshals will find that. They will find that. Do you document it? Absolutely. Do you go call 911? No. I suppose if they say, nope, we're not going to do anything about it, then you may make an anonymous tip to the fire marshal, ask him to check that out. Or if the hallways are so incredibly narrow and full of stuff that you can't even walk, and there's only one exit for a room of 16 people, or you notice occupancies through the roof and everyone's crammed in like sardine cans, you'll know, and you'll know based on management's reaction. If they say, we're going to do something about this immediately, your level of confidence is going to go up. But if they go, oh, we keep boxes stacked to the ceiling all the time, then you go, oh, okay. Do you plan on stopping that? Do you have a fire life safety guy and staff? No, we don't have anyone for fire life safety. Oh, you don't have anybody trained in CPR? No, we don't. Okay, you don't have anybody. What's your procedure for calling 911? But that's also why your audit reports go all the way up to the top. Because if you're auditing a smaller part of a larger company, the larger company just may not be paying that close of attention. They may think everything's under control. And really, they could have out of date fire extinguishers with boxes stacked to the ceiling and no CPR training and not enough exits to leave and stuff. Some of that's building codes. But I've seen it personally where doors are locked during business hours, both directions, and those can cause deaths. We're just looking at all the nightclub fires and how many people died in nightclub fires because either the doors aren't lit or the it's not lit at the ceiling, and there's no working fire alarms, and the doors aren't enough to let everybody out, and the occupancy's through the roof. So you'll know with experience. And if you see something bad enough, here's the thing that a very, very, very wise auditor told me. If you see something bad enough and nobody will do anything about it, it is your responsibility to do something about it. If there's a box in the way, and I've seen this so many times, if you can move the box and get it out of the way and put it somewhere and nobody will do anything about it, you just move the box yourself. I need to move this box right now out of the way. I saw it, and I am becoming responsible for this by being aware of it. And so I've done that because, and you document that. You document that because you need people to be on board. And if people aren't taking you seriously and they're not doing what you say seriously, that's all stuff you need to tuck away. So, wrapping it up. Here's a little case study. I try to do this. I try to do one of these at the end of every one. So, this has happened to me, just like pretty much everything in this has happened to me. You're in a conference room. A lot of conference rooms, at least nowadays anyway, should have some kind of standard work for lean manufacturing, Toyota way, whatever you want to call it. Every company's got it. Every company usually comes up with their own name for it, but it's all the same. Everything looks clean and nice in the picture, but there's tripping hazards, there's cords, there's electronics. People have brought in food. I've seen this before. It's disgusting. People will bring in food, and you'll look at the expiration date, and it'll be months old. And you'll go, why is this here in case somebody wants it? It's 2 months old. Somebody could get sick. Oh, well, they should know better. I'm like, you can't leave expired food where people can get it. Ugh. And you can see records sitting on the table. You see records sitting on the counter. And just unlocked, there could be doors open to the world that are unlocked. And you see records and food and tripping hazards. You got to think backwards. Somebody had to have made the standard work on the wall. Somebody should be auditing and reviewing these rooms. When was it audited last, if at all, and can you find the reports? And with all that information, you can put the pieces together and find out why they allow expired food to just be sitting in the conference rooms. Why the room hasn't been designed properly to where the outlets aren't where people are going to trip over the electronics. Why electronics are sitting on the floor. And why the records aren't locked up like they're supposed to be. Customer records, they could have social security numbers. They could have background checks. They could have any number of private information. They could have government information. It's important that you have all your senses open and that you're able to apply the problem to a root cause. It's basically a root cause analysis, except it's being able to do it on the fly all the time. So that's it. That is the end of this one. This has been Chance Paladin, and this is part 1, the basics of auditing, and the basics of critical thinking, the basics of having a quality management system. This is the presentation I always give when it all starts. So if you like this, I know this is not a video game, whatever, but this is how I think. So this channel's got a lot of QA on it. A lot of, quality assurance testing, because I QA a lot of video games on this channel. And I'll be QAing a lot more, believe me, as soon as I get access. It takes people a long time sometimes to give you access to test their games, but this is the methodology I use. I use QMS, Lean, and the Toyota Way, etc., etc. So, thanks for watching, and I'm going to shut this off and stop rambling. Like, subscribe, and tell your friends, and let me know what you think about these. If you want more of them, I have a ton of these. So let me know, and I'll talk to you guys later.